access, equity, inclusion, diversity. These are all terms that are thrown around so much, rightfully so, actually. But they're thrown around so much in music education and in music teacher education, and they are everywhere. They are in conferences, they are part of action statements, strategic plans. The words are all over the place. And yet, I know that a lot of folks are having a difficult time actually putting some of this into action because, truthfully, we take a lot of time to talk about what it is. And sometimes we fall short as a profession on actually helping teachers figure out, well, what does this actually mean for them? So if this is you, if this is something that you are struggling with, we're going to get into that right now. Hey, folks, and welcome. This is a new YouTube channel, Teaching Music to a Different Beat. Before we get into talking about equity in music education and what it means for us as teachers and as maybe people who also teach other teachers, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for tuning into this channel. This is new. This is actually my first video on YouTube, specifically devoted to helping teachers innovate their curriculum in ways that they possibly have never imagined. And so I'm going to start that today with this topic of equity. What is equity? What does it mean for us? And what could we do to be more equitable in the classroom? And so, first, what I want to say is that, equity in music education, this is a long game. Okay. This is not I'm going to go to a couple conferences and see a couple workshops, and suddenly I will magically be this masterful, equitable teacher. This is it's almost kind of like a lifestyle choice. It is something that takes progress, never perfection, because we're always moving towards more equitable practices. But it takes practice. It takes practice. It takes time. And it takes patience as a teacher. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm a product of many degrees like everybody else where equity really wasn't the central focus at that time. This was 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, actually. But equity, the idea of equity was spoken about a little bit, but not nearly to the extent that it is addressed today in music education. And as if you go to any conference at all, you'll see a zillion sessions, and rightfully so, on access, equity, and inclusion in music education because it's so important. It's on everyone's mind. It's on every school district's mind. It's on every private school's mind. How can we be more equitable? What can we do? But what I said earlier was we do a wonderful job of defining equity. We define what this might look like, but we don't really do a great job necessarily in our profession of actually digging in into taking practical and realistic steps to be more equitable in the classroom. So that's the intent of this video for today. This is not going to be an in-depth coverage of anything. Like I said, equity is a very long game. It will take years and years, and you'll get better over time the more you dedicate yourself to this. But this is meant to just kind of be a start and a little bit of a thought provoker, maybe, on what you might be able to do even tomorrow to be a little bit more equitable in your classroom. So, first, what I wanted to say is that I wanted to share with you my definition of equity. It's really interesting. I always assume that folks define equity the same way that I do, and they don't actually. There are very different conceptions of what equity looks like in the music education classroom and ensemble setting. Okay, so for me, for the purposes of this video, equity is essentially giving students what they need, what each student needs to succeed in the music classroom. For me, it also means giving each student what they need to succeed outside of my classroom as well. It is very whole child oriented. Okay. And so, assumptions that I make when I think about being an equitable teacher, and this is not really a popular assumption. In fact, there have been some people who have stood up out of my sessions and walked out of the room when I said this. But one thing that I want to say and just be very transparent about is that in music education, for me, if you're an equitable teacher, you are recognizing that music quite possibly is not the most important thing in your music classroom, because equity centers whole child. It centers everything. It gives students exactly what they need to be successful, like I said, in the classroom and outside of the classroom, out in their real world. Okay. When I think about equity, I think about, if one of my sons got sick and he comes home from school and he's not feeling good and he has a fever, I'm not going to give my son a pair of crutches and say, "Good luck, kid. Have fun with that." That's not what my son would need. My son would need maybe some chicken soup, maybe some Tylenol, some bed rest. I would want to give my child what they needed so that way they could get better from their fever, from the flu, whatever it is that he has. Okay. And the same thing is true for equity. We are giving students exactly what they need to be successful in our classrooms and outside of our classrooms. So, what I do want to talk about is what equity centered teachers, what equity minded teachers do in the classroom. What are they centering? What are they doing? What are they thinking about when they plan lessons and they plan, management routines and they just plan their work in schools? What do they do? So I'm going to show you a little bit of what I believe equity centered teachers do and how you might be able to focus these intentions in your own classroom. When I think about equity centered teaching, equity centered music classrooms, general music classes, or ensemble settings, or anything in between, I think about all of the things that go into really and just embodying an equity mindset within the music classroom. And there are so many things that go into it. Like I said, this is a long game. We actually have a whole program at Longy about this. But I do want to show you one thing that I do create for my students, which is this equity centered mindset wheel, I guess is the best way I would put it. And it just pretty much puts into a visual component of what equity could look like in the music classroom. So, students and teachers and student teachers who are driven towards equity centered classrooms are centering, these things on this wheel. They are incredibly student centered. They are always thinking about each student individually. They are never thinking about all of the students. They're thinking about each one individually. What does each one need? How can they center student individuality? How can they center the academic needs and the social and emotional needs of each student in the classroom? How could they build out lesson plans and engage with these students based on those needs? How do they remove barriers? Right? If we're not helping students with those academic needs or those social emotional needs, well, then we're not actually removing those barriers for them. We are actually creating barriers for them to be successful in our classrooms. They think about, what does culturally relevant mean for each student in the class? They also think about culturally responsiveness, being culturally responsive. And yes, those are two actual different things that I'm not going to get into today. But there is cultural relevancy, and then there's also cultural responsive teaching. They're honoring student identity. They're honoring student culture. They are making space for all of these things in the classroom. They're making space for student voice. They're the teachers who start every school year with a survey of what do you want to learn and what kind of music do you like and what are your goals in music? And they do more than just do that survey. They read the survey, they take it to heart, and they actually purposefully engage with students in ways to ensure that those wants And those desires and those needs are all actually going to happen in the classroom. Those surveys are not collecting dust on the Google Drive. They're actually being used to inform teaching. So this is a lot. I know that this is a lot. That each thing on this wheel really could be hours and hours of workshops and professional development and other things. But there is something here that I'm sure that you are already starting to work on. And I always say to people who are just starting out or people who are maybe even not just starting out, but the people who are thinking to themselves, what next? What can I do next? I always say, just pick one thing on this wheel and focus on that for a while. And that could be 1 week, it could be 2 weeks. Focus on it for months because it's that practice of doing these things over and over again, finding ways to give students voice and choice, finding ways to honor student individuality, to honor someone's culture and identity, finding those ways and doing that on a regular basis that makes it so that way it becomes kind of like a new way of teaching, a new way of approaching everything that we do in the classroom. And then one day, if you do these things so much over and over again, it will just come to you more naturally. That's how these habits work. That's how any habit works. You work on it and you get better. And then one day you don't have to think so hard. You are just naturally thinking about it all the time. And then when that time comes, then you can start thinking about what else on this wheel can I now meaningfully tackle? So like I said, this is a long game. I've said it a few times now. This is a long game, but what can you do to meaningfully engage with any of these things on this equity driven educator wheel? One tool that I created, because I don't think that you could ever have too many resources at your disposal to help you get organized when it comes to equity centered teaching, is this equity driven class inventory. It's just a simple table that helps you get organized as a teacher. Specifically, what does each student need? What are those academic needs, those social emotional needs? What are their individual characteristics? What do you know about their culture and identity? What do you know about what they want, right? What are those wants? What are those desires? What do they want to learn? And sometimes all of this information is difficult to track, difficult to organize, and can be quite overwhelming. And so if you're a student at Longy School of Music, you already have access to this. Or if you are a member of Buy Me a Coffee, you actually also have access to this as well. But if you're not, this is a great resource for you to use with your classroom. I always recommend using it at the beginning of a school year, using it again in January just to kind of do a little self-check and see if anything has changed. And then one more time in May or June towards the end of the school year to see really how this inventory has changed over time because things do change, not necessarily their academic needs or the social emotional needs. They don't change so quickly, maybe over a year, but certainly more about their wants and their desires. Those definitely change. And so use this to your advantage. I hope it's useful for you. I know it's been useful for me, and I hope it saves you a lot of time. I really, really hope that this video has been able to provide you at least one resource or one way of maybe shifting your mindset on how you would engage in equity in the music classroom and ensemble setting. This is a work in progress. I always feel like for me myself, it's always a work in progress, as it should be. But I hope that something here was helpful for you. And if you do embrace equity in the music classroom, you're going to have so many benefits from your students, from your community, for yourself as a teacher. Things that I'm going to get into later on in this channel as this channel evolves. Definitely dipping into more of those benefits and what that means for you in the future. But in the meantime, hopefully something here has been useful for you. If you liked what I had here today, I welcome you to download the 5 ways to become more innovative in your music classroom today. It is a free download. I will plop that link down in the description on this channel for you. If you are interested in the program where I teach, I'll plop that link in there for you as well. Happy to talk about that program. And if you're interested in supporting this YouTube channel, I will also plop a link down there for you as well. So until next time, I hope that you do all that you can to teach to a different beat. Thanks so much, folks. Take care. Bye bye.